Later today, we're now joined by Arabile Gumede, live for us in Parliament. Hey, Arabile, what's happening there?
Yeah, good morning still, Blaine. Yeah, we've been here out so long, of course, awaiting that midterm budget policy statement by Finance Minister Tito Mboweni that it almost feels like afternoon now. It should come very soon. And of course, we've been building up to this day, but you can imagine for someone like Tito Mboweni, who's only been in office for around 2 weeks or so, that it is something that he didn't even expect himself to be at. And here he is now being thrust into that seat and before Parliament to ensure that he can send out a thorough and good message. Well, right now then I have Tsitsi Hatendi-Matika, who is the head of retail investment at ABSA, to join me and unpack some of her thoughts as well. Tsitsi, thank you so much for your time. Let's talk about your expectations, ABSA's perhaps thoughts on this budget and what the minister could perhaps bring out, considering the need we have for growth.
So the big things that we're tracking, the budget deficit to see if that's intact, the expenditure ceiling to see how revenue collections have been going. According to our numbers, the first 5 months of the year have gone very well. The only thing that's behind target is company tax, and that's for good reasons. So SARS systems are not really coping that much with the bigger companies, and so we'd like to see how that's looking in terms of National Treasury giving us those numbers. Also to see the GDP forecast, to see how they reverse that. So they had 1.5, we now have 0.4 for 2018. So it's quite a big difference. So it's almost a third of what they anticipated beginning of this year.
Yeah. It's also a very bleak picture, though, if you were to look at that sentiment. And I suppose one would say rightfully so. But surely we have done a whole lot more than give ourselves a chance of a 0.4% increase this year.
It's been quite bleak. Beginning of the year, people were ecstatic. There was a lot of hope, and I think this is the first year that you even saw global forecasts being quite, jubilant, and people expecting a lot. So there's been a lot, and not just locally. It's been the global rhetoric coming out of the US and how that's translated into emerging markets. So it's not just a local story, but we did score our own goals, to be very honest.
Yeah.
So those are the key things that we're looking out for in terms of numbers. In terms of actual policy and surprises that you talked about, nice surprises would be SOEs, a nice stable path that we can actually see how do we get out of the doldrums that we're currently in, particularly with SAA and with Eskom. We don't really anticipate that there'll be big announcements because this medium-term budget is never big on policy or any shifts. It's usually just to track, but that would be a nice surprise. The minister has also hinted towards maybe something on VBS, so we will look out for that. But yeah, quite an exciting day ahead.
Yeah, many issues, including the land debate, comes to mind as well, but also the reprioritization of funds for that stimulus package that the president has put forward. Your thoughts on how exactly they're going to reprioritize spending and where that money is going to come from?
So all eyes will also be on that. It's very key because they did say they'll reprioritize, as you said. So one would need to see, are they taking it from somewhere where it was actually working, or was it funds that were being mismanaged, misused, and then is it being allocated correctly? Also, they did say half of it would come from the state-owned development agencies, so your IDCs, your land bank, DBSA. But then that's a bit worrying because IDC released results recently and the results were dismal. So one starts to wonder, how do they actually increase their spending when things are not looking good? Revenues are down, their loan book is not looking great. So that is their job. They are supposed to keep funding in times of need, but the metrics are not looking so great in terms of their balance sheet. So would love to see how that will work out.
Do you think Finance Minister Tito Mboweni can strike a really positive message for the remainder of the world, for the global sphere here? Do you think, yes, he's been in office for 2 weeks, but he's a charismatic gentleman who could certainly send a strong message here and say, I am now in charge and we will then fix things? And do you think he will bring a little more credibility to Treasury?
To be fair, former Minister Nene was quite credible up until the end where things got a bit shaky. Tito Mboweni, I was looking at his Twitter feed to see if he'd give us any hints, but we haven't seen anything, so he's been very busy, clearly. Yeah. So there is credibility that comes with him, and he's well-liked. A lot of people received his appointment very well. So I think the only thing that he can do is maybe the speech, make it his own, but in terms of the actual numbers, those were done already. So I think February story is where we start to see his own signature coming through, and how much of that really is just him, right? So it's not just a one-person thing, it's a team, and there's also government that you have to consider with elections coming up in 2019. So it's a tough time for him.
One of the things that I suppose investors looked at, and I say this ahead of the investment summit, which happens as well on Friday, is policy stability. And we've spoken about that a lot. He's now ensured that the mining charter has come into effect. That's 3.0 as well. We do have a sense of stability when it comes to some of the boards of the SOEs. We've done sort of the right moves for now. There's a lot more that needs to happen, though, surely.
Absolutely. So also in line with this investment summit, so far there are commitments of about 45 billion that we've seen coming through, which in 6 months is quite a staggering amount, considering how FDI had fallen completely off the cliff. So we start to see good messaging coming through from the special envoys, but they also tell us of the challenges that they're seeing. Investors need to see that policy stability. They need to land is a big thing that they talk about. We need to start seeing not only just speaking but action, and those hard things that they need to do. One starts to wonder if there's political will to do them right now.
Yeah, and would you say there is political will to do them? Considering we have an election next year, a lot of the rhetoric could be electioneering. We've seen the whole petrol price saga, where for 1 year we decide, okay, we're going to help consumers out, or the 1 month, and the next month we certainly can't do the same thing. So it begins to be a sense of electioneering. Do you think there's any sense of towing the line for that electioneering's sake to expect it to come through from Dito's end?
So again, very difficult. When one looks at the numbers, I think it's very difficult for people to grasp that fuel levies actually contribute to the fiscus. And the 1 month that they did hold that cost 5 billion to the economy. And this money has to come from somewhere. So it's very difficult for government not only to help the individuals, one also thinks about VAT, right? If we add to the VAT list, it's about 4 billion that's anticipated to alleviate poverty, but someone has to pay for that. So again, it goes back to coming up to an election year, they have to do some of these things to make sure people are happy, and especially the lower income people who just don't understand how things are deteriorating so fast, and not understanding that this is a decade of things that have happened and now coming to fruition. It's a very difficult story, and how do you balance that without tipping over everything else?
Suicide to perhaps hint at a tax increase of any sort next year?
I think that would be quite a political landmine. I mean, given everything that's happened. And also one has to consider that the VAT increase this year has actually landed us with more revenues than anticipated beginning of the year. So some people started questioning, so should they have increased VAT by 1%? But then some of the refunds haven't come through, so we'll only start to see the impact of that when the full year is up. So a tax increase, probably not ideal at this point. We don't anticipate, it's not our base case, definitely.
Tsitsi, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much. And of course, we will be watching that speech with bated breath there. Tsitsi Hatendi-Matika, ABSA Retail Investment Head. Well, as I said, Blaine, we will continue to watch that speech as it comes to the fore. 2 p.m. is going to be a significant time, and we will have it live from you, right here in Cape Town. Back to you in studio, Blaine.
Arabile Gumede live for us in Parliament. Thank you very much indeed for your reporting, sir.